It was astonishing. We've had to rethink the history of technology completely as a result of this single object. It's such a clever, extraordinary, sophisticated machine. Completely shocking for ancient Greece.
It was the remains of a coral-encrusted wooden and bronze box that, curiously, looked like a clock.
They looked, and there were gear wheels inside this bronze.
The sea was never kind to sponge divers. By 1900, every trip meant risk. Storms, sharks, the bends.
Sponge diving. I didn't even know this was a thing. I did not know, so they're joining us to let us know a little bit more about this. This is so interesting, you guys.
But for Captain Demetrios Condos and his crew from the tiny island of Symi, the Aegean was life itself. So when a sudden squall forced their small wooden boat to shelter near a barren rock between Crete and the Peloponnese, nobody expected anything more than a few lost days. The island was called Antikythera, empty, wind-blasted, and forgettable. But boredom makes divers restless. So Condos gave a simple order to his man, Elias Stadiatis. Suit up and take a look beneath the waves. Just a quick dive, maybe a few sponges to make the time worthwhile. Elias vanished into the blue and surfaced minutes later gasping, wild-eyed, shouting about a graveyard of statues. What he had stumbled upon would not only rewrite history, but challenge everything we thought we knew about the technology of the ancient world. When the sea gave up its secret. Stadiatis dropped into the water wearing the standard gear of the era, heavy canvas covering his body and a copper helmet on his head. He sank down through the murky blue until he hit the seabed at roughly 150 feet. And that's when everything changed. What he saw down there made his heart stop. Bodies everywhere. Twisted limbs tangled together in the darkness, frozen in poses that looked like agony or prayer or both. His mind screamed one thing: mass grave. He yanked the signal line hard and shot back up to the surface, convinced he'd just found something no one was supposed to see. But here's the twist. Those weren't bodies at all. They were statues. Bronze figures that had been lying on the ocean floor for centuries, covered in green corrosion, looking almost alive in the dim underwater light. When Condos himself went down to check, he came back up holding proof in his hands. A bronze arm, ancient and heavy, proof that something incredible was waiting below. What followed was the first organized underwater excavation in Greek history. For an entire year, Condos and his crew worked alongside the Greek navy, pulling treasure after treasure from the wreck. Marble statues that once stood in temples, fine glassware that caught the light like frozen water, coins that told stories of empires long gone. By 1901, crates filled with these artifacts were being unpacked at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. But buried among all those beautiful statues and precious objects was something that looked like garbage.
Imagine snorkeling or diving and suddenly seeing statues, faces, and entire scenes appear from the sandy seabed, slowly being claimed by corals, sponges, and fish. It's both eerie and beautiful, a living gallery where nature is the co-artist.
A lump of corroded bronze stuck to rotting wood, crusty and ugly and completely unimpressive. Nobody paid attention to it. It sat there ignored while everyone fawned over the pretty things. For more than a year, it just existed in a corner, dismissed as wreckage. Until May 17, 1902, when a museum scholar named Elias Stadiatis was poking around and noticed something that didn't make sense. Sticking out through the crust was a bronze gear with teeth cut into it, and that single observation opened the door to one of the most terrifying puzzles in human history. The ship that sank carrying this object went down sometime in the second quarter of the 1st century BC. But here's what keeps researchers awake at night. The machine itself was older than the wreck, much older. Scholars now believe it was built several decades before the ship even set sail, making this device over 2,000 years old. And what survives today is just a fraction of what once existed. 82 fragments. That's all we have left. about a third of the original machine. Yet even in this ruined state, those fragments contain 30 interlocking bronze gears, hand-cut with precision that shouldn't have been possible. The largest gear is just over 5 inches across, covered with hundreds of tiny teeth, every single one carved by hand. All the pieces are now locked behind glass in the Athens Museum, still carrying the scars of 2 millennia under the sea. The biggest chunk, called Fragment A, holds most of the gears that survived. Other pieces preserve sections of circular dials and faint letters scratched into the metal. The real breakthrough came in 2005 when a British and Greek team brought cutting-edge scanning equipment into the museum. One machine was a 12-ton computed tomography scanner they nicknamed Blade Runner, built in the UK specifically for this job. It fired high-energy X-rays through the bronze from every possible angle, creating cross-sections that could be stacked into a full 3-dimensional picture. The other piece of equipment was a reflectance imaging system that let researchers virtually shine light on the surface from different angles, pulling out scratches and engravings that had been invisible for centuries. Over 2 weeks, the team didn't just reveal hidden gears. They revealed thousands of text characters engraved directly onto the plates. For the first time since the ship sank, the machine was speaking again. But there was a problem. The highest magnification scans got messed up. During that 2005 session, about 25 out of nearly 3,000 scan slices failed to record properly, and the fragment itself might have shifted slightly during the process. The result was blur and stripes appearing exactly where researchers needed to see clearly. Then in 2018, a team from University College London went back to the raw data and started rebuilding it from scratch. They filled in the missing slices, corrected the distortions, and sharpened the reconstruction. New letters came into focus. Contested readings suddenly became certain. So what do the parts we can actually read tell us?
And what looked to be a hunk of corroded metal that no one knew quite what to do with.
It was not recognized at all as being anything interesting when it was discovered. It was just a corroded lump about the size of a large dictionary.
Let's start with the back, because that side survived better than the front. The upper dial is a spiral that winds around 5 times, tracking 235 lunar months. This represents the 19-year Metonic cycle that ancient Greeks used to keep their lunar calendar lined up with the seasons. Right beside it sits a smaller dial counting 76 years, the Calippic cycle, which tightened the accuracy even further over the long term. The lower half has another spiral marking 223 lunar months, and this one is famous. It's the Saros cycle, the key to predicting eclipses. Nested inside that spiral is an even smaller dial tracking the Exeligmos, a 54-year triple Saros that corrected the awkward 8-hour remainder in each cycle, keeping eclipse predictions razor-sharp. There's also a tiny dial marking 4-year intervals for the Great Panhellenic Games. None of this is speculation. These functions are literally inscribed into the bronze. Zoom in closer on the Saros spiral, and the machine becomes shockingly practical. Each spot on the dial that might contain an eclipse carries a small symbol, a compact note written in Greek. One letter tells you if it's a lunar or solar eclipse. There's also a symbol that looks like an anchor, meaning hour, followed by a letter number combo indicating the time. Phrases like "of the day" or "of the night" warn you whether the eclipse would even be visible from Greece. Those texts describe details like which direction the shadow would come from, how much of the sun or moon would be covered, and even what colors you might see. Imagine using this thing. You turn the crank to a specific month, the dial flags an eclipse, and then you read off the type, the timing, and the full description. For a device from the 1st century BC, that level of detail is absolutely terrifying. The inscriptions also tell us where this machine came from. In 2008, a major study identified the full set of month names on the Metonic dial. They didn't match Athens. They belonged to the Corinthian family of calendars used in Western Greece, particularly in places like Epirus. Calendars are like fingerprints for ancient cities. By carving those specific month names into the bronze, the maker essentially signed the device with its hometown. Now here's where things get really unsettling. The front of the mechanism is mostly gone. The gears and plates that once stood proud of the main frame have vanished, leaving only scraps of the cover plates behind. But those covers were inscribed too, and what survives on them is pure gold for researchers. In 2016, scholars published a detailed edition of what they call the front cover inscription. These aren't poetic riddles or vague references. They're lists of exact planetary relationships for each of the 5 known planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The inscription spells out precisely how many synodic cycles equal whole numbers of years and full revolutions through the zodiac. In simpler terms,
It was obvious from the rest of the stuff on the wreck that this was from the classical world, but the gear wheels were not known from the classical world. And it was then that they realized that this particular piece of bronze was something special.
the cover lays down the exact mathematical ratios that the missing gear trains had to reproduce. Any reconstruction of the missing front has to satisfy those ratios exactly, and this is what makes rebuilding the lost half such a nightmare. The surviving gears show us what building techniques the ancient makers used. The inscriptions dictate which mathematical periods had to appear, and the physical space available inside the bronze frame sets hard limits on how many wheels and tubes could fit without crashing into each other. The rebuild begins. The missing front half didn't get pieced together through guesswork. It was rebuilt through careful engineering, step by step, using the hard facts we already had locked down. And before anyone could even start designing gears, artificial intelligence gave scholars a massive head start. A model called Ithaca, created by DeepMind, helps restore broken Greek inscriptions. On its own, it predicts missing letters with about 62% accuracy. But when historians use it alongside their own expertise, accuracy jumps from about 25% to over 70%. The first person who truly proved the front could be more than just theory was Michael Wright in the early 2000s. Wright, who was a curator at the Science Museum in London, hand-built working models using brass and precision tools. He introduced epicyclic gearing, where small gears are mounted on arms that orbit around larger gears, capturing the non-uniform motion of planets as they move through the sky. He also used something called a pin and slot device, a clever setup where a pin moving inside a slot forces the follower gear to speed up and slow down smoothly. Ancient Greek astronomers expected planets to move irregularly because that's exactly what they saw in the sky. Planets don't glide along at constant speeds. They speed up, slow down, sometimes even seem to reverse direction. Wright proved these effects could be built mechanically, using techniques that fit perfectly within the ancient Greek toolkit. He even constructed a full planetarium model long before the cover inscriptions were fully deciphered. He moved the entire debate from maybe to yes, we can actually do this. Cracking the code. The decisive leap forward came in 2021 when a University College London team unveiled what they called their model of the cosmos. This wasn't just a pretty drawing. This was a full front-side architecture that had to obey brutal rules. It had to fit inside the physical clearances left in the surviving frame. It had to reproduce the exact integer period relations carved into the inscriptions. And it had to allow shafts and tubes to pass through the middle without smashing into each other. At the heart of this design sits a small dome representing Earth, with a system for tracking the moon wrapped around it. The planetary gear trains are arranged so their outputs feed into a bundle of thin nested tubes at the center. The researchers called this bundle the central coaxial output, and it's the backbone of the entire system. It lets multiple displays share the same hub without crashing into each other. The face of the mechanism in this reconstruction is arranged as concentric rings, rather than a mess of overlapping pointers. That might sound like a cosmetic choice, but it's actually crucial. Rings reduce parallax problems. the difficulty of reading multiple hands stacked on top of each other, and they match what the surviving user manual text says about a cosmos arranged in rings with little spheres. One of the smartest moves in the rebuild was relocating the initial drive gears for the true Sun and the 3 outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Earlier reconstructions placed those starter gears behind a large, circular plate. That decision always created chaos, because reaching around required awkward brackets that added bulk. The UCL team solved it by moving those gears to the front. That single shift opened up space and gave each planetary train a clean path to the central output. Part of what makes this layout so elegant is gear sharing. Instead of designing each planet from scratch, the UCL team let several trains borrow key wheels. The true Sun shares a gear with Saturn. Mars and Jupiter share another gear. That kind of economy is essential when the space you're working with is measured in tenths of an inch. Every extra axle adds thickness, and every new wheel risks a collision. By sharing gears, the model stays thin and tight. The rebuild also had to respect a physical skeleton preserved in one large surviving fragment. The main drive wheel with 4 spokes and sets of pillars around its rim. The UCL design uses that frame like a sandwich. Between the big wheel and the strap, they packed 9 closely stacked layers of gearing into a space of about 0.59 inches. Between the strap and the circular plate, they squeezed most of the gearwork for the Sun and outer planets into a gap of just 9.7 millimeters, about 0.38 inches. The fact that the strap sits at an 11-degree tilt isn't an error, it's a blessing. That angle gives Mercury and Venus just enough clearance for their epicyclic parts to slip past their neighbors. One of the most satisfying detective moments in the rebuild comes from a small block on Spoke D that has a mysterious hole drilled through it. For years, nobody could explain why it was there. The 2021 architecture solved it. The small black and white moon sphere on the front needs input from both the Sun and the Moon to show the correct phase. The UCL design routes a mean sun feed through a bar attached to that pierced block, creating the shortest bridge across the fixed central gears to reach the lunar phase device. Suddenly, the block isn't a puzzle anymore. It's a bracket with a clear job. The Venus mechanism provides another breakthrough moment. A small fragment called Fragment D preserves a disc riveted to a gear with a shaft that changes shape from square to round as it passes through a plate. The gear has 63 teeth, with all but 3 still intact. In the UCL model, that disc carries the offset pin needed for a pin and slot follower to create Venus's irregular motion. The surviving bronze fragments sit exactly where the mechanics require them to be. There's also a simple honesty in the gear count. Behind the rear plate, the surviving systems already account for 35 gears. The 2021 model adds 34 new gears in front to run the cosmos. Together, that makes 69 gears total. Under the hood, the designers kept each planetary train as lean as the math would allow. The true Sun uses just 3 gears. Each superior planet runs on a compact 7-gear epicyclic set. The inner planets use 5-gear trains with pin and slot followers. What makes this 2021 rebuild credible is that it can be tested. In 2025, another research team ran the reconstruction through computer simulations. They used triangular tooth shapes and then added small manufacturing errors to see what would happen. The results were a warning. The tooth shape itself wasn't a major problem, but if the spacing between gears was off by even small amounts, the system could jam after extended use. That doesn't mean the 2021 model is wrong. It just raises tougher questions. What kind of gear teeth did the Greeks actually cut? How precise were their measurements? The key point is that this isn't legend anymore. We're now dealing with practical engineering issues like friction, spacing, and wear. Step back from the dial, and the purpose of the Antikythera mechanism becomes clear. It was not a calculator in the modern sense, but a visual model of the cosmos. Turning its handle brought the entire known sky into motion. The sun tracing its yearly path through the zodiac, the moon waxing and waning as it advanced along its orbit, the planets shifting in their distinct cycles, and the dragon hand marking the lunar nodes where eclipses could occur. In one view, it displayed the calendar, the zodiac, the phases of the moon, and the positions of the 7 moving bodies known to the ancient Greeks. Built more than 2,000 years ago, the mechanism translated complex astronomical knowledge into a precise, mechanical form. Its gears reproduced the irregular motions of the moon, the retrograde paths of the planets, and the repeating patterns of eclipse seasons, achievements that required advanced mathematics, careful observation, and extraordinary craftsmanship. What the Antikythera mechanism proves is that Hellenistic scientists possessed a level of technical and astronomical understanding far ahead of what history once allowed them. It bridges the worlds of philosophy, astronomy, and engineering, showing that ancient Greece did not merely study the heavens, it built machines to predict them. Today, every fragment of bronze gears and faded inscriptions continues to be studied with modern imaging and simulation. Yet, even after decades of research, the mechanism still raises questions about who built it, how its knowledge was transmitted, and what other instruments may have existed. The Antikythera mechanism stands as a reminder. Our ancestors understood the cosmos with a depth and precision we are only beginning to rediscover, and the sea may still be hiding the rest of their story. A storm, a diver, a forgotten island, and a machine that proved the ancient world was far more advanced than we ever imagined.